Hello. Hello, Charles Metcalfe.
Good afternoon, Piotr in Krakow.
Yeah, good afternoon, Charles in Portugal. And
Indeed.
hello, everyone here in Poland and perhaps in Portugal as well, if you're watching us. How's the weather like, Charles?
I have to say the weather here in Portugal is beautiful. It's 33 degrees. I'm expecting the temperature to go down a little bit during the course of our presentation, maybe to 32 or 31, but it's a beautiful day. October, poof, it feels more like June or July. It's wonderful.
Same here. Same here. It's an absolutely lovely sunny afternoon, about 27 or something degrees. So it's a perfect afternoon for a refreshing Vinho Verde glass, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, guys, I think you're happy due to this weather and due to this presentation. And just to report, if you're with us, just report what temperature you have where you are. Right, Charles, the floor is yours, and we start.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right, thank you, Piotr. Good afternoon to everyone who's listening, watching, and who I hope has wonderful bottles of wine in front of them. We've got 12 Vinho Verde coming up. And the first thing I'd like to say is that Vinho Verde, for many, many years, was thought of as being just young wine.
But Charles, one thing important.
Yes.
We almost forgot the temperature of the last two wines. Yeah.
The temperature of the last two wines.
Yes.
I'm hoping that you've got all the wines chilled, with the possible exception of the penultimate wine. So wine number 11, which is called Touche, which is a very sophisticated, elegant, and quite expensive red Vinho Verde. And I would like that to be served slightly warmer than the rest. But the 12th wine, which is a traditional, wonderful red Vinho Verde, that should be served chilled. So Touche, less chilled, sort of cellar temperature, 12 degrees, something like that. But the last one you can take straight out of the fridge if you have a fridge somewhere near you. Good. Okay. So just to get going, as I was saying, Vinho Verde used to be thought of as being, the name translates as green wine. And it's very appropriate because the countryside, most of the countryside of the northwest of Portugal, where these wines come from, is green. It's got a lot of rainfall, and that makes it green. So, but the greenness of the wine, it refers more than anything else to youth. It's the youth of the wine. So here we are, a beautiful picture of a green vineyard fringed by trees of Vinho Verde. If you look at the background in the picture, you can see there are a few mountains behind. And that is very much typical of Vinho Verde. It's a country of green spaces, of green vines, of woods, of bushes, of trees, of rivers. And it's very varied in its geography. Most of the soils in Vinho Verde are granite soils. You see, here's a beautiful picture. Oh, there was a river. Here's a river. Anyway, so the point made here, and I'm using now, this is the Vinho Verde presentation that I was sent, which I think is such an excellent presentation that I thought we could use it to start off our tasting. So Vinho Verde, much more than a wine, it's a region. And that's the good point. When you go into a restaurant these days, you will still find in some more traditional restaurants that the white wines are listed as Vinhos Verdes and Vinhos Maduros, meaning mature wines, to distinguish them from the Vinho Verdes. But Vinho Verde now is a demarcated region. So it's not just referring to young wine, it's a part of Portugal as well, the northwest corner of Portugal. So demarcated in 1908. So then but all sorts of different colors: red, white, rosé, sparkling, and then of course you can have aguardiente or brandies made from Vinho, distilled from Vinho. Okay, on we go. So that's where we are. You can see Portugal outlined against Spain, and that green blob in the top left-hand corner, that's Vinho Verde. That is the region from which these wines come. It's a big region and it's got a lot of production. Look at those figures there: 16,000 hectares of vineyards and 16,000 grape growers. Seems an extraordinarily curious coincidence, but apparently that's true. 300, almost 80 million liters annual production. I mean, there's a lot of wine there, and it's exported, Vinho Verde, to more than 100 different countries. There are 9 sub-regions, which we'll talk a little bit about a little later, and we'll talk about the grape varieties as well. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, please. Here we go. Another beautiful picture of Vinho Verde. Again, you get the sense of height. You see forests, you've got the vineyards. But the point is that Vinho Verde, there's what they call the classic style of Vinho Verde. Is young, light, fresh, low alcohol. Very often, you used to find quite a lot around 9%. Nowadays, you're more likely to find them around 11%. But that's low alcohol in terms of most of the world of wine. And then you get the more sophisticated styles of Vinho Verde, and we're going to look at several of those. Okay, let's move on then. So the seasons, mild temperatures, and not a huge temperature range because it's got the Atlantic right to the west of it, and so it's got a strong maritime influence, which gives it a high rainfall, 1,200 millimeters a year. And you've got all these rivers too. We'll look at the rivers in a moment. And mountains and rivers. There you are, vineyard beside a river. Next slide, please. Okay, here are the mountains. So the darker the green, the higher the mountain. On the left-hand side, you've got the Oceano Atlantico, the Atlantic Ocean, with Porto down the bottom. A point to make is that the Vinho Verde region actually includes the city of Porto, and it goes down to the south of Porto. And you've got two parts of the region which are down there. But the mountains, you see, the mountains go from, they're highest in the east, because that's towards the border with Spain. And Portugal does continue further east from that. It goes into a wine region called Trás-os-Montes through the mountains. But these mountains here, Penela, Soares, Gerês, which is a high one, Cabreira, Alvao, Marão, another very high one, probably the highest, I think, of these, Montemuro and Arada. They're all mountains, and so that provides a shelter from the hotter temperatures to the east, and it also provides a certain amount of protection against some of those wetter weathers as you get further east. So the vines grown in the west of the region are more likely to have higher rainfall, possibly slightly lower ripeness than those grown in the east. Next slide, please. That's a very, I love this map. This is a beautiful soil map, the map of the soils of Portugal. All I'm going to say is that you can see all the sort of the blobbly bits at the top. Those are basically mountains. And what you need to know about the soils of Vinho Verde is that, as I said before, it's mostly granite. There's a bit of schist, so it's sort of something like 90% granite and a bit of schist. And then, of course, where you have the rivers, you have some alluvial soils. But granite is a very, very strong influence on the wines of Vinho Verde. Next slide, please. And at last, we get to the regions. So 9 different regions up in the top, with along the border with Spain, which is made by the river Minho. You may just be able to see Minho, which is the river which runs along between Spain and Portugal in the north. You've got this region of Monção and Melgaço, which are 2 towns. Monção is slightly closer to the coast, Melgaço a little further inland. So Melgaço, wines from Melgaço are slightly drier conditions. They can get a bit riper than the wines of Monção. Very famous for the Alvarinho grape variety. What in Spain, just the other side of the river, they call Alvarinho. But in Portugal, we say Alvarinho. So that's the famous one. But there are other grape varieties grown there as well. And now Alvarinho is such a great grape variety that there are other regions in Vinho Verde and are growing it and being now allowed to label it as Vinho Verde. Then you've got 5 river regions. You've got the Lima, the Cavado, the Ave, Sousa, and Paiva, all of them rivers. So all of these start off close to the Atlantic, and as they get closer to the Spanish border, it gets warmer and a little bit drier. And on the other hand, on the eastern side, you've got these 3 other regions, Basto, Amarante, and Baião. Again, warmer climate, higher, drier, and warmer. So better able to ripen some of the more difficult white grape varieties, like, for instance, the grape Avesso, and indeed red grapes. So they can use some of the best reds from Vinho Verde come from these more inland regions. Okay, next slide, please. Grapes, all these wonderful Portuguese grape names. Alvarinho I've spoken about a little bit. Avesso I just mentioned. It's quite, Avesso is a grape that works really well for sparkling wines, but it also makes some structured white wines that are best aged. We've got an Avesso here, which is still a bit young. Ideally, I would, if I had a bottle of that in my cellar, I would be leaving it probably for another 3 years. It's a lovely wine, but it's young. It needs time. Azal used to be the most widely grown grape in the Vinho Verde region. It's got high acidity. It's fresh. It's bright. Not very, I mean, citrus fruits perhaps, but not a lot of really sort of floral flavors. Arinto, otherwise known as Pedernal in Vinho Verde, is got a wonderful acidity, and it is more and more being grown throughout Portugal as being a grape which performs incredibly well because it's quite late ripening and it keeps that acidity, which in a country like Portugal, which is getting hotter and hotter because of climate change, is very valuable. Loureiro is now the most widely planted of the Portuguese of the Vinho Verde white grapes. Lovely freshness, aromas. Again, if you started off lean and crisp, it can develop over 10 years, maybe even more, into wonderful, wonderful wines. But it's very good as a young wine as well. And then Trajadura, bit of a make-weight grape. It's quite often grown together with Alvarinho up in the northwest. It's fruity, it's gentle, it's slightly low in acidity, which means it doesn't keep as long. Next slide, please. Then we're moving on to red grapes. You've got the Amaral, which is not that much grown. Alvarilhão, again, it's not very, very good. It's a lovely grape for making light red wines. As it says, a light ruby color. Boroçal, again, it's a traditional red grape, very much into the mix for Vinho Verde reds. And Vinhão. Vinhão is the most widely planted red grape. And it gives the most astonishing color. You will have the opportunity to see one right at the end of this presentation. It's our last wine. But that makes the majority of red Vinho Verde. Next slide, please. 2 more red grapes. You've got the Espadero and the Padeiro. Both of them make delicious rosés. They're not so good to make actual full-blooded red wines, but they make lovely rosés. They've got lovely flavors, and they make delicious rosés. Okay, next one, please. What about the vine training system? Now, Vinho Verde vines used often to be trained up trees. They used to be planted around fields because there was an edict back in the days of Salazar that fields should be used not for growing vines, but for growing crops because it needs to feed the nation, feed Portugal. And so they planted a lot of vines around the edges of fields, and that's the bordadura. Ramadas are the old, mostly granite trellises that used to be used. Now, into the modern period, bardo and cordon. Cordon, it's a very well-known type of, and so you see there, that's typical cordon vineyard. It's grown along wires, and that's the modern way of growing grapevines. Next slide, please. I think we're going into food now, just to make the point that Vinho Verde has so many different partners, so many different styles of wine. It means you can have it with all sorts of different things. You can have it with cheeses, with nuts, with meat, with fish, particularly with fish, and mariscos, seafood. It's often delicious. Even sort of melon with presunto, cured ham. So it's got a wide range, lots of different kinds of foods you can have with Vinho Verde. Next slide, please. And another one of food. Yes, here we got a little bit more young, light and fresh chicken, tomatoes, a bit of salad. It's summer. It's a summery food, a summery wine. Sorry. And this they're saying, okay, try this with rosés. Don't forget rosé. You do now get Vinho Verde rosé. Rosé and sparkling were added to Vinho Verde relatively recently. I mean, they used to make them, but they didn't have the status of Vinho Verde DOC. That happened in 1999. So it's only been sort of 25 years or so that they've been officially recognized. And finally, this is what you drink with your reds. It's grilled sardines. You can drink other things too, of course. Rejoice fatty meats. But grilled sardines is the classic partner for red Vinho Verde. Okay, next slide, please. And we finish up. Oh, no, we don't yet. Seafood. So here we have some oysters. Portugal, sea urchins there. Portugal is blessed with the Atlantic coast, which has wonderful seafood, as well as brilliant fish too. So it's great to have Vinho Verde. I have to say I have one particular favorite restaurant that I very often go to. It's inexpensive. I know the people. They're friendly. The food is excellent. And I have one particular, I'm not going to say what it is, but I have one particular Vinho Verde on their list that I almost always drink, and it's delicious. Next slide, please. Finally, you've got the other thing you have to remember in Vinho Verde is they make brandy. So this is distilled Vinho Verde. We're talking about white wine distilled, and that's called aguardiente. And you get two kinds. You either get it made from the sort of leftovers when that's called bagaceira, the leftovers after you've made your wine, the sort of stalks and pips and things like that, or it's distilled wine, aguardiente vinica. But so what you would drink with brandy, you can have dark chocolate things. We can have fruit cake and all sorts of things. The Portuguese love their sweet dishes. And so a little glass of aguardente towards the end of a meal with a classic Portuguese sweet. Not a bad idea. Next slide, please. Here we are. Don't serve your wine too cold. Serve it cool by any means. 8 to 12 for white. Rosé, the same thing, I would say. Maybe a little less chilled. Vinho Verde red, quite often they like it really chilled. Sparkling Vinho Verde, sure, yes, chill that. And then it depends how you like I quite like my brandy not too warm. I'm not one of these people who holds it in his hand for ages and hopes it's something miraculous is going to happen. I like it served just slightly cooler. And if I want to warm it up in the glass, I can do that, as I can with this glass of wine that I see in front of me. Okay, next slide, please. So sales, this is interesting. White accounts for almost 70% of Vinho Verde sales. Red is a decreasing amount, and it's down now, as it says here, to 9.8%. I'm not sure that it's as much as that. And rosé is coming up. So next slide, please. And that's interesting too, because actually, Vinho Verde is increasing in sales all the time, in exports, and it's increasing faster in what it sells in Portugal which is obviously not export, but the sales of Vinho Verde in Portugal are increasing faster than it's a respectable increase on export as well. But what my friends here in Portugal tell me, the reason that sales are increasing even faster in Portugal than they are in other countries is that foreigners come here, tourists come here, they love Vinho Verde. They probably come here during the summer, the weather is warm, they're having wonderful dishes of seafood, and they're enjoying the sun, and they're loving the Vinho Verde. Okay, next slide, please. And this just gives an idea of exports. It's quite interesting, this, because I never realized The countries here at the top of the list, you've got Germany and the States, which are sort of level pegging. In this one, I think the States may have overtaken Germany since this was done, which I think is dated from 21. But anyway, Germany and the States are level pegging. Then come Brazil, which you'd expect because it's an old sort of colony and it's a huge place, Brazil, and they drink a lot of wine. France is next, and then who comes next? Poland. Now, I was really surprised when I said that. I knew that Poland liked Vinho Verde, but I didn't realize quite how much it liked Vinho Verde. It's ahead of Canada, it's ahead of the UK, it's ahead of Switzerland, it's ahead of a lot of other countries who I would have thought drank more. And here you have the exports in litres, similar kind of figure. Again, Poland is in 5th place. Sometimes it's in 4th place. So it's doing incredibly well, Poland, with sales of Vinho Verde. It's just becoming more and more popular. Next slide. Oh yes, the Vinho Verde route. It's a beautiful country. It's got rivers, it's got mountains, as I've said, it's got lovely countryside, it's got beautiful green vineyards, it's got people who will show you around and give you a wonderful time as you look around. These are all very summary picks, but I mean, don't forget, you can drink Vinho Verde at any time of the day. I mean, I'm someone who, if I'm drinking fish or seafood, I'm probably going to turn to Vinho Verde, whatever the season of the year, because I find it it's lighter in alcohol, which is sometimes no bad thing, and it's delightful. So anyway, don't think of it as the only summer, but you can do so much. There's a lot of cultural. There are good Vinho Verde wine routes. You can look at churches, you can look at castles, you could look at monuments, all sorts of things to see. It's really worthwhile exploring Vinho Verde and its beautiful towns and cities. Next slide, please. And that's it. So that is our presentation. I cut it a bit short. It's slightly shorter than the presentation that is you saw in full. No, that's not the one I want. So here we are. So this is us starting out. We're starting out on the wines now, and the first wine we're going to have is a wine from a property called Quinta da Raza, called Dom Diogo, which should come up next slide, please. If you could do me another slide. Oh,
we
no,
we have a question in chat.
Yes.
Is the climate change affecting red wines?
Yes.
Higher alcohol?
Frankly, climate change is affecting wines all over the wine growing world. And yes, not just red wines, but also white wines. And so I think I said that a typical young, fresh Vinho Verde used to clock in at about 9%. Now it's much more likely to see it at 11.5, 12 degrees. And partly that's just because the grapes are riper. Why are they riper? Because there's more sun. So yes, but it is making it possible to make riper wines in styles that before were slightly challenging, like red wines. Okay, so here we have, just to remind you of where we are down in that sort of bottom left-hand corner of the map is where Vinho Verde is. And then you've got these 9 regions to the right, which we shall refer to as several of them during the course of our tasting. We don't have a wine from Baião, but we've got wines from most of the others. Anyway, okay, next slide, please. So Quinta da Raza. Here you have a nice slide of Mafalda and Diogo in front of their vines, sort of feeling proprietorial and feeling happy to be there, I think. And there's a good vineyard from there, a picture of their vineyard. So that's Bashtu, that little green blob to the right, just under the picture of Mafalda and Diogo. Their name is Mafalda and Diogo Teixeira Coelho. The family has been in this estate since at least the 17th century. There's a wonderful old manor house which sadly burnt down. But here in the Bashtu, it's protected because it's a bit higher, and B, it's over to the east. And so it's in those slightly higher eastern mountains. and they get drier weather, and they can ripen certain grapes better. They've got daughters studying at the moment. Their daughters in their 20s. One of them is studying business studies. The other one at the moment is hoping, she's studying agriculture at the moment, but she's hoping to do a degree in at California at Davis in winemaking. So one of the things that Diogo told me, he said he's been selling for many years in Poland, and he works with a company called Wineland, and he's been working with them for 10 years or so. And he said they're very good partners. And I got a quote here: "I would like our children to sell to their children." Well, that's a lovely thought. So here we are. Okay, let's have a look at the wine then. This is first wine, Dom Diogo. This is their slightly less expensive label, and it's made from the Padeiro grape variety. Padeiro is not a very widely planted grape, and it gets its name, which is interesting, because you're probably aware of a variety of Pinot Noir called Pinot Meunier. It's one of the Champagne grape varieties. Pinot Meunier is so called because the leaves have a sort of white dusting on the leaves, which makes it look as if they're dusted with flour. And Meunier, and indeed Padeiro means baker. And so this sort of dusting of white flour, it suggests that it's been in contact with flour, for which you obviously make bread. So this is Padeiro. It's a very pleasant pale color. It's a lovely, gentle red fruit. It's a sort of red salmon color, possibly slightly reminiscent of Pinot Noir. A little bit of rose hip in there. Seems sweet mid palate, but you know it's got acidity, which is exactly the same as the residual sugar. So it's balanced. So although it does have a little bit of residual sugar, it's balanced by this high acidity of 6 grams, 3.38 pH. It's a low pH, quite high acid wine. Just a bit of CO2. As I said, quite a lot of these less expensive wines, they just have a little bit of CO2 added at the bottling line. So don't think that this is a remnant from fermentation. I think this is a squirt of CO2 added to this wine, as it is to so many other wines of this style. It's on the bottling line, and it's added because, particularly in Portugal, but in some of the export markets as well, particularly in Portugal, people who drink a Vinho Verde, which is absolutely without any CO2, completely flat, sometimes they feel a bit cheated. They say, "Oh, this isn't proper Vinho Verde. It should have a little bit of a spritz, a bit of pétillance, a bit of whatever you like to call it." And so this, like many of them, just has a little bit of CO2 put in on the bottling line, so people don't miss that there's few little almost bubbles. Okay. Then, yes.
Comment in chat. Refreshing and inviting.
Oh, good. Well, I like it.
It's a nice starting wine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too challenging as a starting wine. And we're going to continue in the same kind of vein. Mm-hmm. We're going to go on now to a cooperative. This is one of the co-ops, and this is interesting because the Guimarães cooperative is also a member of the co-op of co-ops, which produced our next wine. But the Adega Cooperativa de Guimarães, it's the Arve region, the River Arve. And it's a very, very modern installations. It's not a big site. You can see the aerial photo of the winery. It's not huge, but they bought, I think it was 10 quintas to build the wine. 10 hectares to build the winery, and it was modernized at the beginning of this century, and they had this grand opening planned for the 9th of November 2021. And the awful thing was that was 9/11. That was, sorry, I'm talking nonsense. It's September. the 11th of September, not the 9th of November. And it was the same day as the fall of the Twin Towers. So they actually received the news about the Twin Towers as they were having their opening party, which was unfortunate. But, you know, they got the winery opened, and they provide very good. One of the things about cooperatives in Portugal, you have a lot of, at the moment, these guys, there are about 73, 78 active members. They have had a few more than that. But occasionally people drift away or they change their mind and they grow something other than grapes. But what quite often happens is that if you have a grower who's supplying to a cooperative, he's probably keeping back some of the wines, or she, because there are a lot of women, very good women grape growers in Portugal as well. They're keeping back some of the grapes to make their own wine. So you've got them, and then if you get the co-op of co-ops, which, that's the next wine, which Catherine has just opened. But anyway, looking at this one, Praça de Santiago Rosé Espadero, a different grape variety, not Padeiro, but Espadero. It's similar kind of style, but possibly not quite as red fruit character. When I was going round, I suddenly noticed this wine in front of me, which had the label in big capital letters, D-A-V-E, Dave, which, if you're English, it's short for David. And what it turned out is that because it's the Arve, the region in which this is made, this was of Arve, de Arve, d'Arve, and they'd left off the apostrophe to say it was of Arve, because the Vinho Verde Commission told them they couldn't use it because that suggested that it was more precisely located than it was. So they just called it, call it Dave. Anyway, we're not tasting Dave today. We're tasting the Praça de Santiago Rosé. Again, you can probably see in your glasses, it's got a little bit of bubble there. Again, added on the fermentation at the bottling stage. Not aged, stainless steel. Again, very similar, exactly the same sugar and acidity. So although it's got some sugar, you don't really notice it because of that 6.5 grams of acid. You see, you wouldn't really, if you had a glass of that, you wouldn't think, oh, this is a bit sweet, because it's got that acidity. And I think that's a wonderful thing, which is throughout the Vinho Verde world, because they have this lovely, slightly damp climate, they never lack for acidity. Yes, Trajadora perhaps is a little low in acidity, but basically, Vinho Verde always has a fresh, bright acidity. And if you've got a little bit of residual sugar in here, like you do here, it's balanced by the acidity. Good. So, delightful, young, fresh, pale pink. And as I say, these rosé wines, these pink wines, are becoming more and more popular. People are drinking more and more of them. So the shadow in front of my screen from time to time is my dear wife, Catherine, who's standing in front of the sun. Not surprising. Okay, move on. She's moved out of the way now. Move on to the next slide, please.
Do we know the distributor in Poland? Do they have any?
I don't, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I don't know who distributes this. I've already been through. Oh, hang on. I got something here. What Catherine took down as, I should have asked you this before, Piotr. She's written down Cubia Chinese. Does that mean anything to you? Cubia Chinese? That's what she's written down. Transliteration from Polish to English and via Portuguese is possibly. Anyway, so yes, they do have a distributor, but we haven't been able to work out who this is.
Cubia Chinese. Okay, yes. That sounds quite Polish to me.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay. With such light wine, what would be the best pairing?
Such a light wine is, I would be drinking this as an aperitif, I think. You know, I would be drinking as an aperitif. I don't think I would necessarily be looking for food to eat with it. But I mean, if you were, I'm terribly tempted to say a bag of crisps would be pretty good. But just something you could have this. It's perhaps a little too sweet for shellfish, but maybe prawns. I quite like the idea. There are some sommeliers who love pairing pink with pink. So a beautiful pink cooked prawn with a glass of this might be a very pleasing pairing for them. I think maybe it's just got a little too much sweetness, but maybe that acidity would carry it through. So let's try it with some fried prawns fried in garlic.
Okay. Prawns and
Okay.
garlic.
Prawns and garlic. Yeah.
Very well. So number 3.
Number 3. This is Via Latina from Verde. Now this is interesting because it's a cooperative of co-ops. Go back just a second to that previous slide, if you would, please. You see that those are the cooperatives on the left-hand side: Braga, Guimarães, Felgueiras, Amarante, and Paredes, and Valdecambra. Those are the 7 co-ops that make up the grouping that is Verde. It's a cooperative of cooperatives. The biggest is Felgueiras. Thank you very much. Let's go back to the information on the fact sheet. So this is what Verde does. They don't make any of their own wines. Next slide, please. They don't make their own wines. They buy in wines from these cooperatives. They blend, they bottle, and they do the marketing and sales. So, if you were a member of one of those cooperatives, you're growing grapes, and you might have kept some grapes for your own wine. You sent some to your local cooperative, and they have made a wine, and they've sent it to Verde. So it could be appearing not only on your own table, made by you, whether in a tank or a bathtub, who knows, but it could be sold by the local cooperative and then again in a different blend by Verde. So this is a fully sparkling. It's fully sparkling. It's not champagne method, sorry, traditional method. It's actually done by the Charmat method. So the sparkle is induced, is under pressure in tanks, like Prosecco, for instance, or Asti Spumanti. So that's how it's done. It's less expensive to do it like that, and frankly, the bubbles seem to me always to be just as impressive. This one again, it's Espadero. Yes, bit more sugar in this. So you're going to taste this. It's got full fizz, but you're going to taste more sugar because it's 25 grams. They've deliberately tried to make a sweeter wine. Mm. To be honest, that's very good acidity, 7 grams a litre, a nice low pH of 3, but they've deliberately left more residual sugar in because they want to make a wine which is sweeter. I have to say that often I find when Catherine and I go to birthday parties here in Portugal, it is very typical in Portugal at the end of a birthday party. They have lots of cakes and puddings and things like that. And then at the end of the party, they suddenly decide that they've got to have this moment of celebration. So they sing the Portuguese version of Happy Birthday, etc. And what they drink then, they then take out a sparkling wine. Now, usually, it's not very sweet. And here we are, we've had all these sweet dishes. And when the Portuguese talk about sweet dishes of doces, they are really sweet. So we've had all these sweet dishes, and suddenly you get your palate hit when you're trying to sing Happy Birthday. You've got your palate hit by this rather dry, high acid white wine, and you think, oh God, I'm not really enjoying this. This, on the other hand, this pink wine, with its 25 grams of sugar, that to me would be an ideal celebratory birthday wine for the Portuguese. I would sing much more happily. Anyway, so that I think is the perfect pairing. I would say it's on a birthday celebration at the end of the meal when the time has come to sing Happy Birthday, and you bring out this, and it's not going to be ruined by the fact that you've had all these incredibly sweet cakes beforehand. Verkop is a very impressive place. It's big, it's industrial, very modern. One of the things that I found when we were going around, the people just seem to love working there. The relations, the relations between employees, and I can think of 2 or 3 companies I've met like that here in Portugal, where you just get the feeling that everyone enjoys working for the company. It's a very positive atmosphere, and I don't know, maybe they just got brilliant HR people, human relations, much better than you get in some places. But Verkop has a really positive atmosphere, and I'm sure that cooperates to their willingness and their trying to do their very best to make the best possible wines. Okay, so oh yes, just a note here, they have sold to Biedronka from time to time. I don't know, they also do a lot of sales, actually here in Portugal, they do a lot of sales to 2 of the big Portuguese supermarkets. One is called Pingo Doce, and Pingo Doce is owned by, guess who? The family that owns Biedronka. So they have a big connection there. They also sell to Continente, which is another of the big Portuguese supermarkets. But Biedronka is certainly one of the places where you might stand a good chance of finding this wine. Now, I want you to have a deep breath, and maybe have a little bit of bread or a cracker or I can't say a grilled prawn or an oyster because they're probably not on the table. Who knows what you've got in front of you? But we're now going from a 25-gram residual sugar wine to a wine which is pretty well, is it totally dry? Let me have a quick look at my notes. We're moving now to this lovely, it's a lovely winery. There's 2 charming people, João and Leila Camizão, and that's João in his winery, and they have this winery called Sem Igual, which has a double meaning. Sem means 100, SEM, but it also means without. So Sem Igual means without equal. Nothing is better than this. João was working in India in IT, and he had a sort of a moment of deciding he was in telecoms, setting up a software team, and he inherited 10 hectares of vineyard from his grandfather, and he thought, well, maybe this is the chance I've been waiting for, and so he came back to Portugal, and he and Leila set up this winery. His grandfather had already fallen in love with wine, and he was very excited by his winery, although his winemaking apparently, according to João, was not brilliant. But anyway, Leila works very much. She was working in business events, so she works very much on the events side. They also have an absolutely beautiful, what's it called? Not an Airbnb, but a place they rent out for the night. It's a lovely little stone building, which they've done beautifully. And I think they do, because it's as you can see, this is not a big winery. These are small tanks. And they rent it out, and they struggled to start with, because what João wanted to do, he decided that he wanted to make a different style of wine from the traditional sweetish, slightly fizzy Vinho Verde, some examples of which we've just had. He wanted to make them dry. He wanted to do interesting things with them. And so he decided that he was going to take a slightly different path. He took on a very experienced winemaker, a wine consultant, who had worked with his grandfather. And he first started working with João because he said, well, I knew your grandfather, so I'll try. We'll see if we can work together. He's called Jorge Sousa Pinto, and he's a very experienced wine consultant. I've met him at a couple of other companies as well, making very good wines. And so they decided that they were going to make dry wines. Brace yourself, you see residual sugar 1.5. So I'm sorry, it's a bit of a leap from 25 grams to 1.5 grams. This is why I'm talking a little bit more, because I want to give you a chance to get the flavor of the the lovely pink fizz that we've just had out of your mouths. And since 2021, they've used wild yeasts. So it's a chancier business. So you see the label there, Seng Igual, and into the cutout of the label on the bottle, you've got the, if you look at the side, it's the numbers for 100, Seng. So it's got this double meaning, Seng Igual, 100, and then without equal. But anyway, they decided that they were going to use just wild yeast, and quite difficult. And he had to move into his own winery because, as he said when we were chatting, he said, I had to move out of my wine consultant's winery because, frankly, when you're using wild yeasts, there are so many other yeasts going around in a commercial winery, as this was. You can't be sure that the wild yeasts get a chance. So they built a little winery, and there it was in the last picture. And they've got 10 hectares. They don't use all their grapes. They sell some of their grapes to cover some of their expenses. Most of what they grow is Arintu and Azal. And I was hoping that they'd send me a picture of their two cats, which are called Arintu and Azal, but I'm afraid they haven't arrived. But anyway, so Arintu and Azal. So Arintu, if you remember when I was talking about it, it's lean, it's steely, it's a grape that is very much used to give high acidity, quite often in places which don't have very high acidity. Well, that doesn't apply to here in Vinho Verde, because Vinho Verde always has pretty good acidity. And I'm just trying to remind myself exactly where it's in Sousa, which is slightly further down, a bit further south and a little bit further to the east. So it's slightly drier. And then Azal. Azal is the grape variety that used to be most planted in Portugal in Vinho Verde vineyards. And it's now, there's not as much around. It's been overtaken by Loureiro. It's been overtaken also by Alvarinho. There's a lot more Alvarinho planted now. People have realized that Alvarinho is a great grape. And unlike earlier, in olden days, you were allowed to make Alvarinho in Vinho Verde, but only in the district of Monção and Melgaço. Now it's allowed throughout the Vinho Verde region. Alvarinho is a great variety. And so people have planted much more. Anyway, this is a blend of Arintu and Azal, both of them quite lean. And as you can see, they gave us a vertical tasting of this particular blend. And I chose this because it seemed to me that it was a very typical example of what they had. There were other ones. They had one, for instance, from 2016, which was very much alive, but it was 2017, a really warm year. And I thought, oh, this is so sexy, so attractive, so appealing. But I thought it's not typical. So I've gone with the 19, which is a more typical year. It's going to be a bit of a shock after the 25 grams of residual sugar rosé that came before it. But steel yourselves. Natural yeast. I love the nose. Piotr, you looked as if you were about to say something.
Yeah, I'm just reading a question in chat. Why those oaky notes on the notes?
Perfectly reasonable question. And the answer is there is no oak
on the nose.
There's no oak. What there is,
where from?
Is a certain amount of, it comes from work on the lees, and it comes also from the fact, possibly, that they've used wild yeasts. So, but no oak. I'm looking at all my notes here. In fact, I remember on the 2020, I've written down intense, rich, you'd think oak, wonderful balance, great acidity, now already long, but there is no oak. So that comes from work on the lees and from perhaps more interesting yeasts than a normal killer yeast that you'd find in a commercial winery, whose job is to get the fermentation through as quickly as possible. But it's got a sort of creaminess to it, and I know exactly what you mean. That, I think, is the lees work rather than oak. Well, I know it's not oak.
But it's a very serious wine.
It's a serious wine. So this is why, I mean, it was a bit of a gamble. So I think this after that 25 gram residual sugar one, but it's a serious wine. And this is a very good example of the new generation of serious white Vinho Verde.
Yeah.
Oh,
Very well.
I love it. Catherine is saying ginger. Oh, she's just been cooking with ginger. And she took a mouthful of this afterwards, and she says, this tastes wonderful with the ginger she's just been cooking with. So you don't have to cook ginger with this, but if you do, it will taste very good.
Ginger. Okay.
No, I think this is lovely. Or ginger as part of a mix of herbs and spices.
Yeah. Very well.
Ginger and lime.
Another question: Do
Yes.
you recommend to pairing Vinho Verde together with bacalhau, traditional Portuguese coffee?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I would go more for either a red wine. The Portuguese are very fond of drinking red wine with their bacalhau dishes. There are so many different ways of cooking bacalhau that it's very hard to give an answer which sort of covers the whole spectrum of dishes. But I would say it's more usual in Portugal, and I think I would agree with this, to drink it either with a red wine, sometimes quite a powerful red wine, or to have it with quite a rich, structured white wine, rather than with Vinho Verde. Now, this is not a typical Vinho Verde, so maybe, yes, this might be a good thing, but I would, if I were drinking this with a bacalhau dish, I think what I would do is I would be looking for an older vintage. I would be keeping this. One of the things that João offers, as a matter of interest, even though they don't have huge numbers of bottles or anything, he does offer about 6 different vintages of this wine. So if you turn up at his winery and say, oh, can I try this 2016? Well, who knows, maybe it would have been finished by the time you get there. But it was looking delicious when I was there. He had 2016, he had 2017, 18, 19, 20. I think 16 was as far back as he went. But he had amounts that he could sell of all these different vintages. Right. Anyway, we better get off João and Leila and move on to the next one. But I enjoyed it.
Too fast? Sorry.
Delicious. Okay, Guapus. 2 guys, they met when they were studying enology together in Villarreal, which is the main wine university in the north of Portugal. And they got on well together. They found themselves working for the same wine consultant, actually exactly the same wine consultant as was the consultant for João and Leila at the last at Sem Igual. They worked with him for a while, and then they decided, after they'd been there about 10 years, they'd learned a lot. Jorge Sousa Pinto, that's him. They decided they would start up on their own. So to start with, they started a consultant project, and they called it Wine Lords. And they were making wines really all over the south of the Vinho Verde region. That was their patch. They have an office in close to Baião, and their winery is in Penafiel. So they were very much operating in the southern half of the region, but in various different places. And they eventually started their own project together in 2016. They started Guapus Wine Project, and this is a picture of the vineyard from which this wine comes, which is quite a high vineyard. Okay, can we have the next slide, please? And you see, if you look at the label, it says 450 Ardina. Now, the number on the label always refers to the number of meters, the height of the vineyard. So this is a 450 meter high vineyard. It's not theirs. They buy the grapes, and they're very careful. It's granitic soil. It's got a little bit of residual sugar, but again, in balance with the acidity. And I think that's so important with these wines. So it's modern, but it's not sort of ultra modern like João and Leila last time, because you've got a little bit of that residual sugar to soften it. But It's set against 5 grams of acidity and at a pretty low pH of 3.26. So you've got a high vineyard. You've got, it's that lovely sort of view over the top in the last picture of mountains in the background. And they've made, the vines are more than 25 years old. It's pure Arinto. So this great variety which is being increasingly planted throughout Portugal because it has high acidity. And if you've got a vineyard which is getting hotter and hotter each year, you're having to pick the grapes earlier and earlier. Arinto is a very useful grape to have in your vineyard because that will keep its acidity. And in hot places like the Douro Valley, for instance, and even down in the Alentejo, in the hot south of Portugal, they're planting Arinto to try and keep that acidity. So this comes from a place which isn't too hot. It's steely, and that's what Arinto will do. You've got that acidity. You've got a little tempered by a little bit of residual sugar, which has been left in deliberately. They give it 3 months of batonnage in stainless steel vats, and then they bottle it in late March. And they think that the more batonnage it gets, the more you get the sort of length and persistence. And they make about, they've got about 10,000 bottles left of 22. And when they're hoping they're going to make 40,000 bottles to maybe 50,000 of the 23. And, but it's fresh. They also make a very good Averso, but this comes from this single vineyard in the Amarante subregion. And it's Arinto. It's crisp, it's fresh, it's steely. Lovely. Fresh, bright, and that will hold. It will develop. It will just get a little bit rounder, a bit more honeyed with extra time in bottle. But at the moment, it's lovely as it is. 22. It's as young as it can be, if it's out of the fermentation vat. Anyway, so they're very much at the beginning. They don't have a producer, an importer in Poland. I know because I asked. They said no, but they do quite a lot of work with Japan. They have some export to the UK. And what they're trying to do is add a new export market every year. So maybe this will be their year for Poland. They also have another brand called Castelo Negro, where they make slightly less sweetness, slightly less the traditional wine style, a little bit more experimentation, sometimes a little bit of experimentation with oak. Anyway, Guapush, maybe an interesting prospect for future sales in Poland. Next slide, please. So this is a beautiful property. That house that you see through that gateway is a beautiful house. Casa de Verde was, the vineyards were bought by a large company called Santos Lima relatively recently. And they haven't bought the house. The house is still owned by the family who've had it for a very long time, whose name is long and aristocratic sounding. I can't remember it at the moment, but they still use it. And they use it, the Pinto de Mesquita family, Pinto de Mesquita. And they use it for weddings and events like that. And I have to say, it is beautiful. But here are the vineyards. So these go into the Santos Lima is the company that owns the vineyards and makes the wine. This is the first of our pure Loureiro wines. Remember I said Loureiro is now the most widely planted of the grapes in the Vinho Verde region. It's aromatic. When it's young, it can be steely and fresh, but it's always got this aromatic. And I did a vertical tasting of about 20 years at one property, not one of these producers that we're looking at today, but another producer called Quinta de Camariz, a little bit before doing the tastings I was doing for this presentation. And I was just astonished. Some of the wines that were 15, 20 years old were just amazing, straight Loureiro. When they were young, they almost tasted of nothing. High acid, very lean, very neutral. But as they aged, it reminded me actually, and I don't know if you have much experience of this, but it reminded me of Australian Hunter Valley Semillon, which sometimes at the beginning of its life, it starts at 11%. They're picked very young. They're not oaked. And as they age, they develop these extraordinary, rich, toasty, complex characters. And that really was what this reminded me of, this series of aged Loureirous. So it's a very exciting grape, I think, and I think it's wonderful that it's the most widely planted in Vinho Verde. So here we are. Here are the figures. It's a 22, so this is at the beginning of its life. Grande Escolia, the best selection. 12% acidity, high 6.4, low pH, and just 2.8 grams of sugar. So this is it's not totally dry, but it's damn near dry. Very much stainless steel with batonnage, and then 6 months aging just in stainless steel. A very good price, this, $6.25. I don't, I'm afraid, know who is responsible for this in Poland. They did say they already sell the Vinho Verde to the Polish market. Yes, also Sweden and Norway. I have to say that José Santos Lima, I met him years ago when we were writing a book about Portuguese wines. And I said, who do you work with in England? And he said, all sorts of people. And I got the feeling that he was a man who liked to form relationships with particular shops or hotels or things like that. He wasn't so keen on having a distributor. Maybe that's changed now, but he very much liked to form relationships with people who sold wine directly, and then he would sell to them. Anyway, what do you think of this Loureiro? Do you see what I mean by this slightly toasty character? It's sort of lemony, toasty, in a funny kind of way. It reminds me a little bit of young Riesling, except not as aromatic. I hesitate to say this, but I'm afraid that slipped down backwards. I didn't find myself capable of spitting that one out. It's high acid. It's going to be such a lovely wine in 3 or 4 years. I mean, if I had this in my cellar, I would leave it there and I would come back to this because I know it's going to turn into something. It's already a lovely wine, but it's going to be even better with 3 or 4 years aging, I think. So Quadra de Vinho Verde, Santos Lima, large. And actually one of the things they said to us when we were there, he said it's the largest bottler of still wine in Portugal, except for Sograp, the huge family-owned wine company who make Mateus Rosé. And it's because of Mateus Rosé that he's only number 2. So this guy who I met 20 years ago has gradually been adding on new bits and pieces. He's bought other wineries. He's bought this one. He's got wineries in, where has he got? He's got it in, the main base is in Lisboa, Alenquer. He's got wineries in the Algarve. He's got in the Douro, and he's got a partnership in the Alentejo. And all the while, he's been building up his holdings. He's been building new wineries, and he's doing brilliantly well. And the wines that he makes are just top. Okay, let's move on. As the Vinho Verde, we may not move on to Quintas de Homem. This is our other Loureiro wine. Quintas de Homem, it's a beautiful old house. You can see a little bit of photos through the trees there. And there's one of their vineyards. Now, Quintas de Homem, you might think, I know Portuguese. Quintas, that's farms in the plural. Do homem, of the man. And that's what I thought until I went there and I met Nunu and Anna, the consultant winemaker, the enologist. She's not a consultant, she works there all the time. But Nunu said, no, the Homem is the name of our local river. So these are farms, estates of the Homem River. And they have two. I think they may have bought another small one now. They've got the two estates, of which that photo is obviously one of them. This is the Omeng Valley. It's granitic. It's up in the Kavadu region, which is a bit further north than some of the other regions. It's north of where have we been to? We've been in Sosa. We've been in. Have we been in? No, we haven't been as far as Lima, but it's sort of midway. But very much granitic soil. And they've got these two quintas. And his father, who's still involved, he's now 73. He's always been up, as he says, for a challenge. I was very impressed by Anna, the enologist. She started part-time, having worked for various other people, she now works there full-time. She's a passionate cook as well as everything else. I have a lot of time for people who like cooking. She loves experimenting, and she has a passion for Loureiro, she says, and she says it's all about flowers. She plays a lot with temperatures, plays a lot with cleaning the juice, times of skin contact, on all the varieties. This one gets fermented for a month at 12 or 30 degrees, and then batonnage on the lees. She likes using oak, but not too much, which is very much after my own heart. They bought 3-year used oak barrels, and that was new oak. I think can ruin a wine. It can completely dominate the flavor. So all you can taste is sort of sawn planks. But by the time an oak barrel has been through 2 or 3 or even 4 years with wine inside it, it can still give you that gradual controlled oxidation, but you've lost most of that oak flavor, which I like to taste wine when I'm drinking a wine. Anyway, they've got in the vineyards, they've got Loureiro, they've got Alvarinho, they've got Fernão Pires, Espadeiro for the reds and Rosé, and a little bit of Vinhão, and then a bit more in Quinta do Passo, their other one. They sell almost all on the export markets, and this is where I realize that I don't know if they sell to Poland. Anyway, see what you think of this. Now, let's move on to have a look at the figures here. And as you can see, it's wild ferment. So this is another wine made purely from Loureiro, but wild ferment, so wild yeasts. And one of the things that Anna said, she said, we tried it for 2 years, it didn't work, so we couldn't use the wine. But this year, it's great. We are very happy with it. And so this, think back to the one you just had, that very nice Loureiro from, I can't remember what the last one was called, but the very nice Loureiro we've just had. And then this has just got an extra dimension. It's got more complexity, more, and what she does here, she does more texture. There's just a bit more, it's complexity to it. I love this. And as she told me when we were there, she said there's no residual sugar at all. This is bone dry, not just. Quite a lot of people said, oh, it's got less than 2 grams, which is very nearly dry. But this has no sugar. And yet you don't feel a sort of aggressiveness. It's got over 5 grams of acidity, but that it's smooth, it's rounded, it's soft, and it's only 2022. Just imagine what that can do with a few years in the bottle. It's going to be an extraordinary wine. But I think this is an example of really interesting winemaking. They also do some very good things with Arinto, and I don't know. I just thought this was a very good wine from a a really delightful couple of people, not a couple, but Nunu and his winemaker Anna. And they are just making cracking wines. And again, I go back to this thing that not all Vinho Verde is of this sort of slightly sweetish, fizzy, gentle, easy drinking. Sometimes you get wines which are really quite challenging. I think this is quite a challenging wine, but it's delicious. Okay, let's move on. So what comes next? Casa Santa Eulalia. So then here we are. Again, this is Francisco in his vineyards, Francisco Leandro, and that's the house there. You've got a picture, I think, taken by Catherine. Catherine took, I think, both those pictures. And Francisco in the vineyard. It was sort of early in the season. The vines hadn't really sprouted, but they were coming on. What was that? Was that one? I can't remember. Anyway, that's Francisco. Didn't take that. Catherine did not. Catherine in the background is denying that she took that one. Okay, so that's Francisco. Now here I do have a Polish stockist. If you like the wine, it's imported by Wina Zasada in Krakow. Wina Zasada, does that mean anything to you, Piotr? Zasada? Well, anyway,
say again.
It's Wina or Wina Zasada with a Z. Zasada.
This is great. Wina Zasada.
Wina Zasada. Okay.
Wina Zasada. Yes.
Good. They're the people who import these wines.
Krakow.
Yeah, yes. In Krakow. And again, talking to Francisco, he got very excited about this. As you can see, is a single variety Avesu. Now, Avesu, as I said, is a relatively neutral variety in its youth. As it ages, it becomes more complex. It's brilliant for sparkling wines, but as a young wine, it can be quite neutral. He said, I'm going to read you some of what he said because I just thought it was fascinating. He said his grandfather had a very good friend who was in Baião, which is the great the region down in the south of Vinho Verde, where they are particularly proud of their Avesu. And he brought Avesu from this friend's vineyard. He said, it's a difficult grape, very vigorous, prone to botrytis and mildew. Some years, it produces nothing. Nowadays, we can manage it better. When you get it right, it's the top for purity in the Vinho Verde region. There's a sort of saltiness. You start to salivate with this wine. With food, you eat more and drink more with Avesu. And so he was very excited by it, and he felt that this is a good example. And so let's remind myself of it. It's quite gentle. It's quite understated. A saltiness, yeah, maybe. Yes, it's interesting because it's got a sort of lemony, creamy. I don't think this has any oak in it at all, as far as I can remember. Now, I'm sure it doesn't have any oak. But it's got this sort of lemony freshness with a creamy background to it. Now, that creamy background, I know from previous experience, that will develop and make the wine richer and more complex as it gets older. For the time being, I think it's a very good young wine. And yes, I could see myself drinking a glass or two of this with a bacalhau dish, perhaps bacalhau à gomes de sá, something like that. But I think it's a lovely wine, and it's great that you've had the opportunity to look at a pure Avesu, because even though it's not an Avesu from the classic region, they're up in Bastu, up in that sort of top, not quite the top right-hand corner, but quite a long way up, but very much in the east of the region, high. What do they say for their altitude? Between plots between 250 and 400 meters. So they have some very high vineyards because that's Bastu for you. So it's higher, it's drier. You can get the alcohol 12.8. You see, it's one of the higher alcohol wines we've got here. And I think it's a tremendous wine, actually. It just needs possibly a little bit longer in bottle to show it its best. What do people think? Ah, yes, we're getting some thumbs up, I see. Good. We love this one. So do I. Thank you. I'm delighted.
Oh, it's really nice one. Nice one. It's a great price in Portugal.
Yeah, good one to come back to. I think I might have a glass of that later when I stop having to spit. Okay, let's move on. Next wine. Now, this is Aveleda. This is a big company, Aveleda. It's family owned. It's owned by the Guedes family, and the current co-chairs are two brothers, Antonio and Marco. Are they brothers or are they cousins? I can't remember. Anyway, Antonio and Marco, the two co-CEOs of the company. And this is we've got these lovely pictures. These were taken by Catherine. Maybe that first one wasn't. But that's a very good view. So it's a view from the very wonderful gardens that they have around the house, looking out over a vineyard. And there is a view of an ornamental lake they've got in the gardens with a couple of swans in there. The next one is extraordinary. You can see this tower made of stones with this spiral wooden staircase going around it. If you look very carefully, up at the top, in the top left-hand corner, you can see a goat. And then there's another little white goat further down. It's a goat tower. And I've only ever seen one of these before. Apparently goats love climbing. And I've seen one goat tower before in a winery, which was in South Africa. Charles Back has a goat tower. And it's like this. It's, you know, the goats can climb up round this spiral staircase and have fun going up and down. And then there's a little picture at the end with me and the very charming young woman who showed me around, who's called Isabel, she was the perfect hostess. She seemed to have all the facts absolutely at her fingertips. She was thoroughly well informed and fun to be with. So this is, as I say, it's the Guedes family, and another branch of the Guedes family is the family that owns Sugrap, the people who make Maciej amongst many other things. So it's a big family. It's very much a wine family, and they've got some very successful wineries. I have to say that Aveleda not only has this vineyard in Vinho Verde, but they've got they make aguardente brandy. They're very proud of their brandy made here from Vinho Verde, but they've also got Quinta Val Dona Maria in the Douro. They've got Quinta da Guieira in Bairrada, a winery called 12 Nights in Lisboa, and they've got Vila Alvor in the Algarve. So they've got lots of different wineries. The last time I was at Aveleda before this visit, I thought, yeah, these are okay wines, simple wines. There's a big brand called Casal Garcia, which sells huge quantities all over the world. But I was amazed now. They have really upped their game. They are making the wines they've got that they make here are just so much better than I remember them. So let's move on to the fact sheet. So this is an Alvarinho. They are very much concentrating at Aveleda now on Alvarinho and Loureiro. But they've got quite a lot of Alvarinho planted, which I don't remember being the case when I was last there, but that was probably quite a long time ago. So this is, they've got two different kinds of Alvarinho made on different soils. And you see this says solo de xisto, soil of schist, so slate. I mentioned at the beginning that most of the vineyards in Vinho Verde are granite or granite-based, weather decomposed granite sand, but this happens to be on a schist soil, so slate. And schist is a much warmer soil than granite. Granite is bright and the light bounces off it. It never really gets hot. But slate, on the other hand, which is quite often a very dark rock, it gets hot. And so this makes for much richer kinds of wines because, you know, there's sun not only coming down from above, but also coming up, reflected up from the roots of the vine. So this is the Alvarinho Solo de Xisto. She also showed me, Isabel, she showed me the Solo de Granito, which was much tighter, leaner, higher acid, very good wine as well. But I just thought this would be a fun change, because this one is the Xisto, and it's just richer, more opulent. As you can see, they're actually playing around a bit more. Batonnage, extended aging, 9 months in bottle. That it so happens that an old winemaking friend of mine has just become the chief winemaker at Aveleda. I didn't see him because he was, I can't remember where he was, in Brazil or somewhere. But I'm looking forward to touching base with him again. He's a very talented winemaker, and I'm sure that he will only improve the wines that are already looking very good indeed. So again, you see, this is another example. Here we've moved to Alvarinho, which is itself a very exciting grape variety. But this is Alvarinho in a warmer soil. So it's a schist soil. A lot of what's planted in Monção and Melgaço is granite based. A bit of clay up there, some schist, but this is schist. So this is a warmer soil which produces a richer style of wine. They've kept it down to 12%, and it's still got a lovely acidity. You see, you've got over 6 grams per liter, and less than 4 grams of residual sugar. So effectively, it's dry. It's not quite as dry as that one we had a couple of wines back. But Alvarinho has this. It's exotic. The flavors are opulent. They're exotic. It's stone fruit. It's things like peaches, apricots particularly, and it's one of the great varieties of Western Europe, I think, actually, Alvarinho.
Well, that's a great wine.
Isn't it a lovely wine?
It's more than lovely.
Oh, God, it's delicious. Yeah, because it sort of walks this wonderful tightrope between opulence and lovely, bright acidity. It's the balance that I think is just so fabulous with this. So another very good example of, and she showed me other wines. The most astonishing wine she showed me was one named after the founder, Manuel Pedro Guedes, which was 90% Alvarinho and 10% Loureiro. And that had a certain amount of oak, but very discreetly done. It was quite expensive, but it was a tremendous one. You see, if I'm trying to do anything, folks, this afternoon, I'm trying to make the point that Vinho Verde is so various. There are so many different types, so many different grape varieties, so many styles of wine, and some of them are really of enormously high quality. I think $9.99 is the average retail price. I think that's a very good price for this particularly good wine. Anyway, okay, let's move on.
Do you have the distributor of this wine in Poland?
I don't, and the annoying thing is that I'm sure someone like Aveleda would have a very good distribution network, just as much as I'm sure that Santos Lima would have a very good distributor. I wish I knew. I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that.
No,
I'll tell you what I might do. I might see if the guys back at the CVR Vinho Verde can give me a breakdown of distributors for all these wineries.
Yeah,
I'll send that up, and then you can distribute it to your guys.
Very well. So just 3 seconds for me, guys. Don't forget to take some photos. Okay. Photos. Yeah. Don't forget about it.
Yes, indeed. Okay, so here we have 2 wonderful photos. So this is a property called Quinta do Hospital. Now, Hospital, you might think, that's where you go if you've hurt yourself and you go see a doctor and your nurse and you have things done to you. And yes, that is, of course, true. But it's also the old meaning of a place that provides hospitality. And this particular one is very much in that it's in the Monção Mergaço. It's quite close to Monção, so it's up there in the north of Portugal. It's Alvarinho country, and this is a straight Alvarinho, as was the last one. But this is a beautiful old house, as you can see, which still receives travelers, pilgrims on the road to Santiago de Compostela. So this is a place where you will be received. You will be given. I don't know what you're given. I was given a few glasses of wine to try, but I wasn't actually slogging my way through. From one of the routes up to Santiago is from Lisbon, and we had the sister of a friend staying with us a few months ago. My friend got in touch and said, my sister's doing the Camino from Lisboa to Santiago. Could she come and stay for a couple of nights? I said, yeah, of course. So we had her stay for 2 or 3 nights. She was very glad to get a few decent nights' rest on a comfortable bed rather than in a rather bare hostel, and get a couple of rather nice meals inside her. But so this is still very much something that the Camino de Santiago is, you could call it medieval tourism, where it's not just medieval. People still do it. Oh, I just hit something on my thing, which has made the whole of my screen go blank, which is not what I wanted. Oh, that's better. Okay, so now this is a winery. It's another winery that has changed hands. It was bought by a Portuguese company called Falua, which was originally started in the Tejo, the Tagus River. It was started in the Tejo, and since then it's moved outwards and bought other companies. So it now has this particular company, this wonderful 16th century manor house estate near Monção. But that they also have not just the Tejo winery, but they recently bought a very good winery in the Douro, in São José. So they are beginning to sort of flex their muscles, and it's a family company. Falua was bought a few years ago by a French company called Roulier, who started making animal feed and agro sort of chemicals. But they've diversified hugely into seaweed, into a bit of mining, they're into renewable energy. It's still family owned, but they really want to make a big thing about wine. So they bought Falua, and Falua is at the same time it's expanding. So the Falua chief winemaker, who is a wonderful woman called Antonina Barbosa, she comes from around here. And she knew they were looking for a Vinho Verde estate, preferably one that was growing Alvarinho. And so she tipped the wink to the guys at Falua. And it took a bit of time to buy it, but they eventually bought it. It's got 10 quintas already planted. They've planted another 10 recently. They are aiming for 22 hectares of Alvarinho. They've got a little bit of Loureiro there as well, but in a different part of the Vinho Verde, in the Ponte Lima area. But they do tourism. They receive not only pilgrims, but they're people who are not just on the Camino de Santiago. And they showed us 3 wines. They were all Alvarinhos. And no, sorry, that's not true. One was Loureiro, and I thought it was very good. But 2 Alvarinhos, and I just thought, wow, this is a cracker. So now you can see this is the sort of opulent side of Alvarinho. It's got a little touch of oak to it. I can't remember, what did I say on the thing? Yeah, it's got a bit of oak there. It's got a little bit of new oak and a bit of second year oak. But it's got a long time on lees. And if you look at that alcohol level, 13.5, they've really gone for opulence and ripeness. And they showed us 2 Alvarinhos. One was their straightforward Alvarinho, which was very good. And then they showed us the Reserva, which is this one. And I thought, wow, I have to show this to the guys in Poland. And just that little whisper of oak on the palate. This needs to settle down. You see, it's already a couple of years old. Well, getting on for 3 years old now. But it's in beautiful form. Again, this high acidity. This is the key to so many Vinho Verde. Because they've got this high acidity, they can get away with a richer wine, like this style. They can get away with a wine with some sweetness, like several of the ones we've had. The residual sugar here, less than 2 grams. But it's got this lovely balance. And I think that oak will just sort of fade into the background in the next couple of years. At the moment, it's just slightly obvious, but it just needs a couple of years to settle down. And I think this is going to be a wonderful example of a really classy Alvarinho from well, it's up sort of Melgaço, no, it's Monção, this way, and it's up in the top, up in the Alvarinho section of Vinho Verde. Okay, so
comments to this.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we've got a bit of chat here, which is good. So what have we got? Catherine's just given me a sheet of paper of we've done quite a lot of work on matching wine with food, and she's given me a list of things which will go really well with Alvarinho. And she lists as cheeses, she says cheddar and camembert. Where's the Portuguese cheese? Then for vegetables, she says brilliant with avocado, also very good with sweet red peppers. And then spices, a great long list: ginger, cardamom, coriander leaf, cumin, fennel. And then this is getting me even more excited: seafood, crab, prawns, salmon. Can't see what she's written there, but you know what? Scallops, vieiras in Portuguese. So a load of wonderful seafood dishes, and pork, very good with pork as well. So Alvarinho is not only a delicious wine, but it's also a very friendly match with lots of different kinds of food. Thank you, my love. Also, she says, as a sort of afterthought, tomato. Okay, let's move on. Marcio Lopes, winemaker. Marcio goes his own way. He's I think he's just turned 40, or about to be 40. So he's a young man, and he started making wine in the Douro, and then in Vinho Verde, and he has also got some vines up in Ribeira Sacra in the north of Spain. He got very excited about that and said, you know, it's like the Douro used to be 100 years ago. It's, you know, before they got Patamares, when it was steep slopes, and a bit like the Mosel in Germany, except warmer. Anyway, he got very excited about Ribeira Sacra. But this comes, he's done a lot of experience. He studied in Australia. He went to both Rutherglen, famous for its fortified wines, and he also went to Tasmania. And he worked in Tasmania with a very old friend of mine, who's a winemaker called Andrew Pirrie. We traveled together when we were much younger, and we made wine. We did some picking of grapes in Bordeaux together with another friend of ours called Oz Clark. And anyway, so Antonio and Marcio, I see, Marcio has traveled quite a lot, and he's worked with Anselmo Mendes, who is the sort of godfather of Alvarinho in Portugal. And so he's done quite a lot, but he's a very experimental kind of guy. He pushes the boundaries. He loves doing new things with wine and with grapes. He's based in Melgaço, so that's the warmer of the two great Alvarinho towns. Born in Porto, and his grandparents gave him a taste of the countryside and for growing things, and studied agronomy in Portugal, in Porto, sorry. So this is this wine. Now, I hope you haven't got this too warm, because I've got this just gently cool, which I think is the temperature it should be. This is called Touche, and that is in homage to a great red Burgundy, which some of you, I've been lucky enough to meet it on certain occasions, called La Tâche. It's one of the great wines of the Domaine de la Romane Conti. And Marciu once met it at a wine tasting, and he was completely blown away by this fabulous, elegant, intense, perfumed red wine. And he decided he desperately wanted to make a wine which, although different, was going to have some of that elegance and freshness and intensity. So this is what he found. He found a vineyard right at the eastern end of the Vinho Verde region, near a town called San Gregorio, I think it was. He told me. I think it was San Gregorio. Yes, San Gregorio, northeastern Melgaço, near the River Minho, right on the border with Spain. And as you can see, it's an 80 to 90-year-old blend of all sorts of different grapes: Bastardo, Alvarenhal, Pedral, Canho Tinto, Tinto Fêmea, and many other varieties, planted together 80 or 90 years before. Lovely acidity, and it conforms. It's got the right grapes, it's in the right place, so it can qualify as Vinho Verde Tinto. But you don't find many Vinho Verde Tinto at 50 euros a bottle. And just bear in mind, just think back to great red Burgundy as you taste this. That's what Marciu has been trying to, I won't say mimic, because that's too sort of pejorative a word. It's homage to La Tâche rather than trying to imitate it. And it's got this lovely red fruit flavor. It's sort of slightly reminiscent of Pinot Noir, perhaps, but red fruits, wild red fruits, a savory character, which very much to me is one of the keys to great Pinot Noir. This idea of savoriness. I just think that's a very good wine. What do you think, guys? So nicely balanced. Great one. Thank you. I mean, I agree. There's not much of it made. He does all sorts of other things. He makes wines in clay amphory. He does, he's got one wine. I remember he showed me one, which was a blend of clay amphory, some in stainless steel and some in wood. And he's always pushing the boundaries, experimenting, looking for something a bit different, but always with the idea of freshness and quality and poise. And I think he's one of the most interesting young-ish winemakers in Portugal, let alone Vinho Verde, certainly in Vinho Verde, but in Portugal, I think he's really doing fascinating things. And he's trying to get better every time. Everything he makes, he wants to do it. He wants to do it better. There's one wine he showed that we called, was it with that's the Pequenos Rebentos, which means small shoots, a moda antica, in the antique way. And it was an extraordinary variety. There was hang on, Viagem ao Princípio do Mundo, named after a French film, made by a Frenchman whose parents were Portuguese, and he was looking back at his roots. And so he took an Alvarinho grapes, fermented on their skins for 1 month, crushed and then finished them in fino sherry barrels and in chestnut. And it was an extraordinary wine. Did it with Dirk Nijport, who is another winemaker who really pushes the boundaries in Portugal and has been a tremendous influence on many other winemakers. But Marciu, he's found his own way to a very large extent, although he's traveled the world and he's been to many different places. And I just think, A, this is a delicious wine, and B, he's a name to watch, Marciu Lopes. The wines are never going to be cheap because he does extraordinary things, and he buys very expensive grapes, old grapes, 80, 90-year-old vines from a mixed vineyard. They do not come cheaply. But this, I think, is a wonderful example of how Vinho Verde can push the boundaries and just make new style wines, which are of astonishingly high quality. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's ask the attendees. What do you think, guys? You're not very talkative today.
So. Okay, one more wine we've got, and this is a much more typical red Vinho Verde. Let's move on, please. Adega Cooperativa de Ponte Lima. So this is another cooperative. You can see the Lima River just gleaming in the background of that photo. And that's a picture of the grape reception area. We were there at a time when they weren't receiving grapes. So next slide, please, our fact sheet coming up. And here we have their Vinho. So red Vinho Verde in the traditional style, less than 1.5 grams of sugar, but high acidity. Look at that acidity, 7.7 grams. Vinho is a black grape which has an incredibly dark color. It's not an actual Tinturier, it's not red juice, but what happens with Vinho, is that actually as the grape ripens within, as the pulp ripens within the grape, the juice from the skin starts staining the flesh of the grape, so that by the time you press it, there is some red pigment in the grape. And when you actually add the skins to the fermenting grape mix, you get this astonishing dark reddish purple color. So here we've got fermentation in open vats, controlled temperature, no aging, doesn't need aging, and it's only €6, but it is the most amazing wine. And I hope this has kept its cool temperature, because that's how just smell that. Vinho which is also known as Sauzão in the Douro. It's a grape which is being very much used now to bring freshness to the Douro grape mix. It's always been there in small quantities, but there's more and more being planted because the Douro, as many other places, is getting hotter and hotter. And so they need a grape like Vinho, which has this really bright acidity, keeps its acidity. And okay, let's try this. It's got that little hint, that little prickle of fizz, which is so typical. And just feel it. The tannins are soft, beautifully made, and it's got this wonderful dark fruit and this astonishing color. The traditional way to drink Vinho Verde, particularly red Vinho Verde, in the region, was to drink it in white bowls. So white earthenware with a white rim. So it was earthenware, but it was glazed white. That's the word I'm looking for. Glazed white. And this kind of wine is what they used to call o vinho pintor, the painter wine, because it actually, as you swirl it round in your glass, you can see some of that color still stays in the glass. But you can imagine if you were serving it in a earthenware bowl glazed white, it would really stain the bowl. But it's an extraordinary wine, and this, come on grilled sardines. I think this is the perfect match for this. I'd love to talk at length about Ponte Lima, but I feel I've probably gone for long. We were shown around. We were given lunch actually by one of the sales team, and the president, who is a wonderful woman called Donna Celeste, who was an ex-lawyer. She was I think a sub-minister of the Ministry of Education. She was a very impressive woman, and she just kept talking and talking about the importance of the cooperative in the actual life of the region. And she said, there are growers. All their grapes come from individual growers. It's a big co-op. how many have they got? One of the things they said about Poland, they used to sell to Biedronka, but I'm not sure that they do nowadays. Maybe they felt that the prices they were offered by Biedronka weren't high enough. Some of the smalls, they got 2,000 members, maybe 1,000 active, but some of them tiny holdings, and they've just kept them going. And she said, we make wine only with our own grapes. We're a producer, not a company. The production depends on nature. We have modern equipment, and we invest money we earned, not from the bank. She was a very impressive woman. I thought, wow, what a good cooperative. You know, you get some cooperatives in some parts of the world where you feel the buildings are run down, they don't have the right equipment, and things like that. But not this one. This one, and actually all three of these co-ops, they are immaculately run. And yes, they are selling wines relatively inexpensively, but they're making good wines. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this red Vinho Verde. I'm sure you don't all have grilled sardines ready, but this would be the perfect wine for those grilled sardines. Okay, Piotr. There we are.
Yeah, that's the last one. Thank you,
That's the
Charles.
last one. I'm sorry, I haven't got any more. That's it. I'm now going to have to take them away and drink them.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have some help. We have a couple of friends staying.
Okay.
So does anyone want to ask any questions or anything like that?
Well, I'm just very curious. Are we alone here, or what do they do?
We've had some nice comments,
How
which
many
is
people
great.
is here? Some people. Yeah, some 26 attendees, but very quiet today.
Okay.
Andre is
That's fine.
typing something. No, wait. Poznan. Thanks from Poznan. Yes.
Thanks, Poznan. Good.
They are
Thank
very
you.
laconic in Poznan, you know. It's a sort of Polish Laconia, Poznan, and the part.
That's fine. That's fine. They liked it.
East to Berlin, you know.
Yeah, quite.
Any
That's
other
good.
guys? Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Andre. Anybody else? They might be all dead.
No.
No, you don't.
They're just stunned into silence by the extraordinary variety of these wines.
Adam is from Warsaw, so this could be long.
Okay, good. Okay.
Wait for it.
Do you make orange wine, Vinho Verde? Yes, some people do. Quinta de Rasa. You remember the first wine we had, that Dom Diogo, which was a pink wine. It was one of their less expensive ones, but they have a more expensive range, which they name after the name of their estate, Quinta de Rasa. They do an orange wine. There were a few others that do orange wines as well. But the answer, yes, there are some people making orange wine. It tends to be the ones who are a little bit more experimental, who are pushing the boundaries a bit. I don't think that Marcio Lopes has one that he actually calls an orange wine, but I'm sure. But to be honest, that wine that he made with Dirk, a long time on the skins and finishing it off in sherry barrels, that would have turned out in a sort of very similar to what I would think of as an orange wine. You know, white grapes, but given a long time on skins. So yes, orange. Yes, there are some orange wines around.
Okay, great. So thanks from Krakow. Thank you from Warsaw. And Warsaw here, I'm surprised, red wines with sardinas.
So was I. You know, I was really surprised, Thomas, when I first had that. Catherine and I went to visit a producer who made Vinho Verde, very much sort of in the center. It was probably somewhere near Bashtu, somewhere like that. And he gave us lunch afterwards. And we tasted some Loureiro wines, we tasted some white wines. And at the end, he said, right, we're eating sardines, and here is my red wine. It was made from Vinho, the same grape variety as we had for the last one. And he grilled sardines. I saw him grilling them. And it was a brilliant pairing. I would never have thought that. But ever since, I've been totally confident in saying, yes, red Vinho Verde with sardines is enormously successful.
With lemon, I believe.
Yeah, quite high acidity, absolutely. You could add lemon or not add lemon, but you see, you've got this amazing acidity already, and that you think back to this wine I've still got in the glass. It's got not only this enormous color, but it's also got, I think it had 7 point something acidity. It was very high acidity. So already you've got your sort of lemon equivalent to sort of add sharpness to the match with the oily fish. Very good for you, sardines.
Okay. Acidity like in Polish Reds? No, it's a different acidity, Tomasz. It's quite.
Yeah, I think probably yes.
Well, Polish
I
Reds.
can't say I've never tasted a Polish red. I've had the odd white wine, but I've never had a Polish red wine.
Yes.
Maybe this is a pleasure to come.
If you know Grignolino.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, that's something.
Usually made in Italy rather than in Poland.
Good. Very well. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Charles, first of all. And the good news is Charles Metcalfe as James Bond is coming back soon on November 27th with Alentejo Part 2. Right?
Yep.
If
I hope I shall have a new knee too, so I will be able to walk more successfully.
Yeah. But you're sitting, Charles, here.
But I'm sitting. Yeah. But I need to walk around to visit the vineyard.
Anyway, we wish you all luck with the operation and get the new knee and come to Poland, not walking.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Not this year, I think, but maybe next.
Next year in Poland.
That would be fun.
Very well.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. George, thanks very much. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And somebody's still typing something. Let's see. Thank you very much. You have enjoyed the seminar very much. Yeah, great.
Good.
Yes.
That's what we like to hear. Excellent.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
See you soon, guys.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye-bye.